Welcome back to another episode of SmoothBrainEDH. Today we're bringing you some casual gameplay brought to you by Dragon Shield and some of their new card sleeves. Everybody's picked out a box of the new sleeves and a commander to represent the dragon from Dragon Shield's deep and awesome lore. So let's hop right into it and see what everybody chose and who they're playing. Up first is Logan playing Peach Sleeves, and he chose to represent Pip, the cute little dragon, with Korlessa, the Scale Singer. This is a Simic Dragon Tribal deck that plans to use Korlessa's ability to be able to play them from the top of his library to gain extra advantage. Logan will keep an opening hand of Island, Rimewood Falls, Utopia Sprawl, Ravenform, 3 Visits, Sakura Tribuilder, and Kaiga the Tide Star. Up next is Cameron representing Slate Sleeves. His dragon, Escatorox, spends his time slumbering while blended in with the land. So Cameron chose Kura, the Boundless Sky, to make a mono-green lands deck with a dragon as its commander. And he'll keep an opening hand of Forest, Fabled Passage, Urza's Mine, 3 Visits, Summer Bloom, Greater Good, and Zendikar's Royal. Next is Matt using the Glacier Sleeves. His dragon, Minium, is the guardian of the area between the sea and the sky. And no one can represent guarding the sea and the sky better than the partner pairing of Brallin and Shabraz. This Jeskai deck has 2 main game plans that focuses around its commander's abilities. Either A, whittle everyone down by discarding cards with Brallin out, or B, one-shot people with a giant sky shark. He'll keep an opening hand of 2 Snow Mountains, Cephalid Coliseum, Volcanic Island, Prismatic Vista, Rhystic Study, and Stormkiln Artist. And last but not least, we have Chandler on Blood Red. His dragon is Cimarog, who uses dragon blood in miraculous ways. Chandler chooses to represent him with Bladewing the Risen. This is a Rakdos Dragon Tribal Reanimator deck that uses his commander's ability to ensure there's always a few dragons on the field to protect him or to beat face. And he'll keep an opening hand of Snow Swamp, Prismatic Vista, Path of Ancestry, Mind Stone, Carnelian Orb of Dragonkind, Reanimate, and Damnation. We're about to hop right into the gameplay, but before we do, let us know who you think's going to win down in the comments below. And while you're down there, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already, and check out all our links in the description. We've got deck lists, a second channel for our stream VODs and our podcast episodes, and even a Patreon, so be sure to check those out. But that's enough for now, let's hop right into the gameplay. Matt wins the die roll, and he'll play Prismatic Vista, and then passes to Logan, who will play Rimewood Falls, and will pass to Cameron. Cameron will play and fetch with his Fabled Passage for a Snow Forest, and he'll pass to Chandler while searching. Chandler plays Path of Ancestry, and then passes to Matt, who plays a tapped Hollowed Fountain, and then will pass to Logan. Logan will play his Island, and then will tap for 2 to cast 3 Visits, finding a Tropical Island to the battlefield, and then he'll tap the Tropical Island to enchant it with a Utopia Sprawl, and he'll choose green with the Sprawl. After this, the turn is passed to Cameron, who will play a Forest, and then will cast his own 3 Visits, finding another Forest to the battlefield. And the turn is passed to Chandler, who plays his Snow Swamp, and then will tap for 2 to cast his Mind Stone, and then he'll pass as well. Matt starts his turn off by fetching with his Prismatic Vista for a Snow Mountain, then he'll play a Volcanic Island and cast Rhystic Study. The turn is then passed to Logan, who plays a Scavenger Grounds as land for turn. He'll then tap for 3 to cast an Urza's Incubator, choosing dragons when it enters, and does not pay for Rhystic Study. He'll then tap for 2 and cast Sakura Tribuilder, not paying for Rhystic Study again. The turn is then passed to Cameron, who just plays another Forest, and then passes to Chandler, who plays a Prismatic Vista as land for turn, and then he'll immediately crack it for another Snow Swamp. He'll then cast his Orb of Dragonkind, and he will pay for Rhystic Study, and then the turn is passed to Matt. Matt will play another Snow-Covered Mountain as land for turn, and then he'll tap for 4 to cast Brallin. He'll then pass turn, and he has to discard a Crystalline Resonance in his cleanup, and then there will be a Brallin trigger. And Logan will sacrifice Sack Daddy at end of turn as well, finding a Forest. Now on his turn, Logan will play Yavimaya. Then he'll cast Korlessa, and he will pay the 1 this time. Then he'll cast Kaiga the Tide Star, not paying the 1. After this, he'll pass the turn to Cameron, who starts off with a Dark Depths as land for turn, and he can tap it for a green thanks to Logan's Yavimaya. After this, he'll tap for 5 and cast his commander, Kura, not paying 1 to Rhystic Study. And after this, the turn will be passed to Chandler, who starts his turn off with a mountain. He'll then tap for 4 mana to cast an Immersturm Predator, and he will pay for Rhystic Study. He also makes sure to use the mana from the Dragon Orb so it gains haste. He also points out that Immersturm Predator is a vampire dragon, which fits perfectly with his theme of Blood Red. He also gets a Path of Ancestry Scry trigger, which he keeps at the top. He'll then move to combat and swing his Predator at Matt. When the Predator becomes tapped, he'll exile Matt's enchantment in the graveyard, and then he'll get a 1/1 counter, and Matt takes 4 damage. The turn is then passed to Matt, who plays a Plateau as land for turn. He'll then tap for 3 and cast Jeska's Will. He gets to choose both modes, and Cameron has 6 cards in his hand, so Matt will make 6 red mana and exile the top 3 cards of his library. Unfortunately though, they're all lands, and he already made his land drop this turn, so those are permanently exiled. But he's still got that 6 red mana, so let's see what he does with it. He'll start by using 2 of it to cast Fellwar Stone. He'll then use 3 more, and then tap for a blue and white to cast our friendly neighborhood Skyshark. He'll then use the last floating red, and then tap his Fellwar Stone to cast Wild Magic Surge targeting the Urza's Incubator. It resolves, and the card Logan flips into is a Metallic Mimic, which is pretty good. He obviously chooses dragons when it enters. After this, Matt will move to combat and swings for 4 commander at Chandler, and then we'll pass to Logan. Logan will start off by casting a Brainstorm, and he will pay the 1 Heuristic Study. After it resolves, he'll play a Flooded Grove as land for turn, and then he'll pay 2 to foretell a card. Logan then forgets that he doesn't have his Urza's Incubator anymore, so he can't cast the top card of his library. He'll then just pass the turn to Cameron, and Cameron will immediately cast a Greater Good. He doesn't pay for Heuristic Study, so there is a Shabraz trigger. He'll then immediately sacrifice his commander to the Greater Good, drawing 4 cards and discarding 3. And his commander also trigger when he dies, and Cameron will resolve that first, searching for 3 lands to his hand. He searches for Urza's Power Plant, Urza's Tower, and a High Market. He then plays the High Market as land for turn, and then will tap for 2 to cast Summer Bloom. He doesn't pay for Heuristic Study, and there's a Shabraz trigger. Cameron then plays his 3 extra land drops, being Urza's Tower, Urza's Power Plant, and a Boseiju. Then will tap for 3 to cast Azusa, getting him 2 more land drops, not paying for Heuristic Study, Shabraz trigger. Cameron will then play Urza's Mine, and is now out of land drops, so he'll pass the turn to Chandler. And I would like to add, guys, I think this is the first time I personally have ever seen Tron assembled in Commander. We now move to Chandler's turn, and he'll start off with a Myriad Landscape as land for turn. He'll then move to combat and swing his Predator at Cameron. When it becomes tapped, Chandler will exile Summerbloom, and the Predator will get a counter, and then Cameron takes 5. Now on second main, Chandler will cast a Sneak Attack, and he will pay for Heuristic Study. The Sneak Attack worries the rest of the table, but it does resolve. And after this, Chandler passes the turn. Matt will unfortunately miss his Shabraz trigger on his draw step. Regardless, he'll move to his main phase after this and shock in a Sacred Foundry. He'll then tap for 2 to cast an Izzet Charm, choosing to draw 2 cards and discard 2 cards. Both of his commanders will trigger twice. After this, he'll tap for 4 mana to cast Stormkiln Artist, which is an absolute value house. Then, with his last mana, Matt will cast a Winds of Change, making everybody shuffle their hands into their library and draw that many cards. There will be a Stormkiln Artist trigger, and since Matt is drawing 6 cards off of this, Shabraz will trigger 6 times. After this, Matt will move to combat, and he'll swing for 14 Commander at Cameron, who just has to take it. Matt will then pass the turn to Logan, who starts off with a Haven of the Spirit Dragon. He then just decides he wants to play a reactive game, so he'll pass the turn to Cameron. Cameron will start off by recasting his commander, Kura, and he does pay for Heuristic Study. He'll then do exactly what he did last turn and sacrifice his commander to Greater Good, searching for 3 lands and then drawing 4 and discarding 3. The 3 lands he searches for are Thespian Stage, Field of the Dead, and Vesuva. Then, after resolving his Greater Good trigger, Cameron will play Field of the Dead, getting a zombie. He then casts Soul Ring, not paying the 1, Shabraz trigger, and then he'll play Vesuva, copying the Field of the Dead, getting him 2 more zombies. He then plays Thespian Stage, getting him 2 more zombies. Whew. Continuing on, Cameron will then natural order his Azusa, finding a Titania to the battlefield. No Heuristic Study payment and Shabraz trigger. With her ETB, he returns Fabled Passage and will get 2 field triggers. And then decides, you know what, Chandler might have a Wasteland in that deck, which will mess with my Merit Lodge. So he decides to activate Thespian Stage to copy Dark Depths. Legend Rule happens, and Cameron sacrifices the original copy. Thespian Stage doesn't have any of the ice counters on it, so it immediately sacrifices and becomes a 2020 flying indestructible avatar. Cameron will also get 2 Titania triggers. Alright, this is officially the craziest land deck I've ever seen. It's gotten Merit Lodge out and assembled Tron. Now with the 2020 blocker to block the Sky Shark, Cameron passes the turn to Chandler, who plays a Cavern of Souls as land for turn, obviously naming Dragon. Then, just wanting to lay low while the 2 Titans fight, Chandler just casts a Dragon's Horde, paying for Heuristic Study, and then will pass the turn. Matt will stop him on his end step, and he'll sacrifice his treasure for a white to Path to Exile Merit Lodge. Cameron unfortunately can't stop this, but he can sacrifice it to Greater Good to draw 20 cards and then discard 3. Now on Matt's turn, there's a Shabraz trigger on his draw step, and then he'll cast an Unexpected Windfall. He'll discard a Boros Signet, draw 2 cards, and net 3 treasure tokens from this. There will be 1 Brallin trigger and 2 Shabraz triggers. He'll then sacrifice those 3 treasures to cast a Commander Sphere. Then he'll tap it for a blue and sacrifice it to draw a card, Shabraz trigger. He'll then move to combat and swings a massive shark at Cameron. And this is where Cameron starts to desperately dig. He'll sacrifice a 5/3 elemental to draw 5 and discard 3. He'll then do it again. After this, he'll sacrifice his Fabled Passage for a Forest, getting another 5/3 and 2/2/2 zombies, and then he'll sacrifice the 5/3 again. He'll then sacrifice Titania herself, drawing 5 and discarding 3. He's still not able to find anything, so he starts sacrificing zombies. Each time he sacrifices these, he only draws 2 and has to discard 3. With the first zombie he sacrifices, he discards an Ancient Tomb to it, which is important for later. He'll then continuously sacrifice his zombies to greater good, until his second to last one, he finds a Beast Within. But Beast Within is 3 mana, and he only has 2 forests. It's then that he sees the line. Still resolving his greater good trigger, he discards a Kozilek to it, in addition to 2 other cards. Kozilek triggers upon entering the graveyard, and he shuffles it all back into his library. Cameron will then tap for a green and cast a Crop Rotation, sacrificing the forest that he tapped to cast it. Matt sees what's going on here, so he casts a Channeled Force, discarding his entire hand, which is 7 cards. There will be a Stormkiln Artist trigger, and then 7 Brallin triggers. He'll then draw 7 cards, and then point the 7 damage at Cameron's last zombie, which Cameron doesn't respond to. There's then 7 Shark triggers, and then the Crop Rotation will resolve. Cameron searches up an Ancient Tomb, and then he'll tap for 3 to cast Beast Within on the Sky Shark. It'll resolve, Matt will get a 3/3, and oh yeah, Cameron gets 2 zombies from Ancient Tomb entering. Cameron also doesn't pay for Rhystic Study, so Matt would have got an additional Shabraz trigger there. Matt is still determined to kill Cameron this turn, so on his second main, he'll play a Scalding Tarn. He'll then sacrifice his treasure and exile 7 cards to cast Treasure Cruise, getting another treasure and drawing 3 cards. He'll then sacrifice his Scalding Tarn for a Tundra, and then Matt casts the Tolarian Winds, which he drew off the Treasure Cruise. Matt will get a treasure off this, and he discards exactly 8 cards, which means everybody takes 8, and this will kill Cameron. Matt then uses his last treasure to cast a Soul Ring, and then he'll pass the turn to Logan. Logan will stop him on his end step to Rapid Hybrid Brallin, and he will pay for Rhystic Study. Now in his main phase, Logan will cast the Foretold Raven form on the Stormkiln Artist, getting Matt another token, and he will pay for Rhystic Study again. After this, he'll cast a Renari, Merchant of the Marvels, from the top of his library, not paying for Rhystic Study. He then casts an Augur of Autumn, also not paying for the 1, and then he'll move to combat and swing Kaiga at Matt, who will chump with his 1/1 Raven, and then he'll pass the turn to Chandler. Chandler sacrifices his Myriad Landscape on end step to find 2 mountains to the battlefield tapped. Chandler will start his turn off by sacrificing Mind Stone to draw a card. And he's very excited to see what he draws. He'll pay a red to sneak attack in a Wrathful Red Dragon, and then we'll move to combat and swing them both at Matt. He also gets a counter on his Horde. Chandler asks to see Matt's graveyard, sees an Echo of Eons, and when Immersturm Predator gets tapped, he exiles that and it gets a counter. Matt will then take 11 combat damage, and then Chandler will move to his second main phase and cast a Blasphemous Act with a Wrathful Red Dragon out. The Blasphemous Act resolves, and all creatures take 13 damage. And thanks to Wrathful Red Dragon, Chandler gets to point 26 damage at Matt's face, making life totals a little more even. Matt then reminds Chandler of the Rhystic Study, to which he pays. Chandler will then cast a Reanimate, paying for the Rhystic Study, to bring back the Wrathful Red Dragon, and he'll lose 5 life. He'll get an additional Dragon's Horde trigger, and after this, the turn is passed to Matt, who starts off with an Exotic Orchard. He'll then recast Brallin, and then cast Legacy All-Star, Arkham's Astrolabe, drawing a card when it enters the battlefield. Matt then attempts to move to his end step, and Chandler stops him to remove a counter from his Dragon's Horde and draw a card. Matt then discards 2 cards on his cleanup, and everybody takes 2 damage. Logan will then cast a Kyrie, the Swirling Sky, on his turn, paying 1 for Rhystic Study, and then he'll pass to Chandler. And Chandler will start his turn off by tapping his Dragon's Horde again to draw a card. He'll then play a Command Tower as land for turn, then taps for 2 to cast Dragon Tempest, which terrifies Matt. He does not pay for Rhystic Study, and then will tap for 7 to cast Bladewing the Risen, also not paying for Rhystic Study. Matt decides now's a good time to flash in a cast out to get rid of that Dragon Tempest, and that's exactly what he does, and Chandler can't stop him. Chandler gets a Scry trigger from his Path of Ancestry, and he keeps it on top, and then when he enters the battlefield, he'll get a Dragon's Horde trigger. Bladewing will then return Immersturm Predator from the graveyard to the battlefield, and since Chandler used his Orb of Dragonkind to cast Bladewing, he has haste, so he'll move to combat and swing Bladewing and his Wrathful Red Dragon at Matt. Matt can't block it, so he'll just take 9. And with nothing left to do, the turn is passed to Matt, who starts off with a Tectonic Reformation. And then he'll cast a Surly Badgersaur. Matt will then pay 1 red to cycle an Arid Mesa. There is a Brallin trigger, and Surly Badgersaur will make a treasure. Matt then repeats this 2 more times, triggering Brallin 2 more times and making 2 more treasures, and then he'll cast a Journey to Nowhere, exiling Chandler's Immersturm Predator. He then moves to combat and swings at Chandler, who no longer has any blockers, killing him. Now in second main, Matt casts an Elixir of Immortality, and then passes the turn to Logan. Logan starts his turn off by sacrificing his Haven of the Spirit Dragon to return Kaiga to his hand. He then casts Kaiga and doesn't pay for Rhystic Study. Logan will then move to combat and swing for 6 in the air at Matt, who has to take it. The turn is then passed to Matt, who is now in a do-or-die situation. And Matt starts off by cycling an Ominous Seas, getting 1 Brallin trigger. And he understandably declines the fight trigger. He'll then cycle a Snow-Covered Plains by paying a red, getting a Brallin trigger, and a treasure. He then casts a Ponder, looking at the top 3 cards of his library, rearranging them, and then drawing a card. He'll then cycle an island, triggers, and then will play a Flooded Strand as land for turn. He'll then cast an Emergency Powers. Everybody shuffles their graveyard and hands into their library and draws 7. Matt did cast this on his main phase, but the only permanents he has in hand are lands, and he wants to cycle those. And that's what he does. He'll sack a treasure to cycle 1, do a damage to Logan, and get another treasure. He repeats this 2 more times, and then he finally finds what he's looking for, a flying blocker. He'll cast his Ledger Shredder, because with it and his Elixir of Immortality, he can survive 1 more turn. And so with that, the turn is passed to Logan. Plays a Dreamroot Cascade as land for turn. He'll then cast a Ponder, and he will pay for Rhystic Study. He gives his deck a shuffle, and then draws a card. He'll then cast Balagad Recovery to get the Ponder back, and he will not pay for Rhystic Study. Ledger Shredder then connives, discarding Mystic Remora, and the Badgersaur declines to fight. He'll then recast the Ponder, not paying for Rhystic Study, looking at the top 3, rearranging, and not shuffling this time. And then he does it. He channels Otawara, bouncing Matt's Ledger Shredder. Matt will then respond by casting Thrill of Possibility, discarding Boros Signet, and drawing 2 cards, and Logan will take a damage. The Badgersaur also declines to fight again. Matt unfortunately doesn't find anything, so the Otawara's ability will resolve, and Logan moves to combat, and swings for lethal. Matt shows the Solitude he drew, but he just didn't have another white card. So, Logan is today's winner. Wow guys, that was an awesome game. So many cool things happened, from Cameron assembling Tron and getting a Merit Laws, to Chandler getting to deal 26 with a Blasphemous Act. Let us know what you guys thought in the comments down below. We love hearing from you guys, and while you're down there, don't forget to like and subscribe, and check out all our links in the description. That's all for today, you guys. Have a smooth day.